So thinking back, when I was in high school, my dad was really into running, and he really wanted me to be into running because he was a pretty good runner back in the day. He ran the Boston Marathon like 3 times or 4 times, which is kind of like the big accomplishment in distance running, is to run the Boston Marathon. So he was a pretty good runner back in the day, and he wanted me to be a pretty good runner, except I wasn't really that into running, but that didn't stop him. So it was my freshman year of high school. He signed me up for cross country, even though I didn't go to a high school that offered cross country. I went to a school called Maranatha Christian, which doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. So he signed me up to run cross country with Wheat Ridge High School, who had a pretty good, and I think still does have a pretty good cross country team. So I would go to practice. He'd pick me up from my school, and then we'd drive over to Wheat Ridge, and he'd drop me off, and I'd run, and I'd participate, and I'd do all the practice stuff, but I didn't really do any of the extra stuff that, to be a good runner, especially in high school, you run on your weekends, you run during the summer, and I didn't really want to do that. I was kind of lazy back in the day. So my dad was really into trying to convince me to do what it took to be a good runner. So despite my attitude, so I remember this one race we ran. Megan, I don't know if you remember this, called the Liberty Bell Meet. It was at Heritage High School in Littleton, if anyone knows where Heritage High School was or is. And the way that the meet started, if you can imagine it, we started off running down the street, south I think it was. So we started down the street, and then it kind of took a sharp left and then came right back. So it's kind of like an out and back up this trail. So essentially, if you're what do they call it? If you're a observer, standing at the start line watching everybody run, you could cheer your runner on at the start line, and then just cross over the street, and you'd be there as they came back up the trail. So I'm at the start line. As the meet gets ready to go, the gun goes off, and I'm just getting in my pace, feeling the race, and trying to there's always a crowd of people at the beginning of the race. You're trying to just make space, get your pace up. I'm running down the street and get around to that first curve, run, and come back. And I'm coming back, trying to get into my pace, trying to get my race pace. I see my dad on the side of the trail there, cheering me on. And I wore this today because this is basically what my dad was wearing. He's wearing a polo shirt, jeans, and some kind of running shoes like this, some kind of athletic shoes like these. So I'm jogging down the street, jogging down the path, coming up with my dad, and my dad's like, "Hey, come on, Loren, pick it up, you can do it." Just going all out. And the thing is, he was cheering for me, so much so, but he expected, some more out of me. So I'm getting close to him, running down, getting close to him, and he just, again, wearing basically what I'm wearing now, he just takes off. He takes off in front of me. So, like, if you can imagine, I'm running here, and he's out in front of me, basically running in front of me, and he's not just in front of me, running in front of me, he's literally like 20 feet, 20 yards, something like that, in front of me, and about every 15, 20 seconds, he's yelling back, "Come on, Loren, pick it up. Come on, Loren, pick it up." And we're just doing this for 2 miles, just back and forth. And he's like, "Come on, Loren, you can do it. Pick it up." And literally for 2 miles, down around this course on Heritage, he's just, I'm running, and my dad's just up there ahead of me. "Come on, Loren, pick it up. Pick up the pace. You can do it." And just this whole, the whole thing. And I'm a sophomore in high school, and I just, I was a good church kid. And I was, I didn't cuss back then. But I wish I could have cussed him out. So finally, after 2 miles, I think it was, because it was probably about a mile or at least 3/4 of a mile that he jumped into the course. And finally, near the end of the race, I finally passed him as he's yelling at me, and I didn't want to look at him again. After that, for a long time, if you can imagine, I was pretty mad at him. So he wanted me to be a good runner, and he, I guess you could say he wanted me. I got to catch my breath after that. Man, too much running. I am in shape, believe it or not, but not for pretend jogging in church shape. He wanted me, like all parents, he wanted me to be successful in life, if you can imagine that. I'm a parent now, and a lot of us here are parents, or, we know kids in our lives, and we want our kids to be successful in life, right? I was thinking about this because I was thinking about I was talking with Vanessa this morning. Vanessa was whining about, I won't give her age, younger than me. She's whining about being younger than me. And it's like, August 8th was my 37th birthday. I hate saying it. I joined this networking group a while back, and one guy's like an insurance agent, the other guy does life insurance, and I'm like, why don't you give me quotes? So they gave me quotes. I'm like, oh shoot, I gave you so I gave them both my birthday date, and that the next group was on my birthday. I'm like, you guys do not keep your mouths shut. I do not want to hear anything. And sure enough, they did not keep their mouths shut. But so, I don't know, for whatever reason, since I turned 30, like every year, it's like my next birthday, I'm just like, oh, another birthday, here we go. And it's like that kind of inevitable march towards 40. And apologies to all the folks over 40 here. Apologies. But I remember back in high school, I think it was Karina's brother and one of our friends, like made this pact. They made this pact that when they're 40, they're going to get in a car and drive over a cliff. So apologies to those over 40 here, but back in the day when we were young and we thought, oh, life ends at 40, right? Boy, thankfully, I'm hoping it doesn't, right? But in many ways, my birthday is like an opportunity for me to think back and reflect on the past year of my life and think about, what have I done with my life, in a way, and as I edge closer and closer to that magic number, if you will, of 40. I think back about what I've done for the past years of my life. Back when I was 18, I went to Bible college to change the world. I mean, that's like all we talked about that back then. Changing the world, saving souls, saving the world. In my early 20s, those vague and imprecise goals began to harden into fashion into something a little bit more definable. So I wanted to earn my master's degree by the time I was 30. I wanted to get a doctorate by the time I was 40. I wanted to be a successful religious professional. Hey, buddy. And good news is I'm actually sort of on pace with these goals. I got my master's before I turned 31. That's something. But I need to kick it into gear if I'm going to get a doctorate by the time I'm 40. And, I mean, who knows if I'm a successful religious professional, right? But I think one of the reasons that I went towards these clear and definable goals because I could look at myself and say, hey, I have a master's degree, I'm successful. But more so, I think others could look at me and say, oh, Loren has a master's degree, he's successful. I mean, we all want to be successful in life, right? We all want to be looked at as successful, yet as I look back over the years, and would you believe it, this year will be 20 years, 20 years since I graduated high school, it's easy for me to look back and say, what have I really accomplished in life? Am I successful? Now, I'd bet, or at least I'd hope, but I'm not the only one who's asked myself that question. I mean, we do live in a results-oriented society where we're constantly being evaluated based on what we've accomplished, what we've done, what we've completed. And that's kind of how we measure success in society. Like we evaluate coaches based on their win-loss record. We evaluate teachers based on their students' test scores. We evaluate business leaders based on how much money their company, their sales, or how well the stocks in their company performed. But even beyond the professional sphere, I think we all compete with each other in life to have the perfect family, the perfect relationships, the perfect kids, and I'm kind of failing on that. And I think I was hearing this the other day too. In many ways, like we use social media now to kind of like fill in for what we're insecure about. So like if we're insecure about like our family, we post pictures of ourselves on Facebook and Instagram of like us like hanging out with our kids. Maybe if we're insecure about how we look, we're always posting pictures of ourselves on Instagram. I know that's what I do, right, Tom? Yeah. But more so, I think another way we do it to kind of cover up our feelings of insecurity or lack of successfulness is we get lots of stuff. I mean, we want all the stuff because stuff is like a metric in our society for how successful we are in life. Like if we have the car, the nice car, if we have the house, if the big house, if we have a great wardrobe, then clearly we're successful. And if we don't have the nice car, if we don't have the nice house, if we don't have a nice wardrobe, then I guess we're not that successful. And if you're like me, we find ourselves more often than not mindlessly pursuing these things, money, status, stuff. Because again, having these things, at least according to some people, means that we are successful in life. And like I said, the inverse of this is also true. If we don't have the house, if we don't have the stuff, if we don't have the car, we're not successful. And if we don't, if we're not making great salary at work, if our kids aren't at the top of their class, if the car we have isn't top of the line, then it often can feel like we are not a successful person. I don't know if you're like me that in a quiet moment, when you look back over your past years, when you think about the big dreams you had, the big goals you had for yourself, if you wonder, where have these 5, where have these 10, where have these 20 years even gone? As in, I'm this much older, I've worked this hard for so many years, my kids are growing up, and what do I even have to show for it? My business is still struggling, I'm still driving that same old car, whatever. What do I have to show for these past years of my life? Am I even a success in life? I think it's a question we can all find ourselves asking at times. So today we're finishing up our series called Action Required, and we're looking at the ways that God asks us to live and act in our world. So last week we were looking at Hebrews chapter 11, which Hebrews chapter 11 is a book in the Bible that was written called Hebrews, and it's written to a group of Jesus followers. And in the 11th chapter of the book is what's known as commonly is called the chapter of faith, or the hall of faith, and it recounts famous people of faith throughout the years. So from where we left off last week, it was a chapter again highlighting folks like Abraham and Joseph and Moses and countless other figures, some named, some unnamed, of these, heroes of the faith. So it's a bit of a dense read this morning. So if you'd like to follow along with me, you can. I will also have it on the screen, but we're going to try to make our way through it. But we're going to start in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32, and we're going to read some more about these heroes of faith. Let's see here if I can find it. I like reading it from the text still. So verse 32 says, "Then what more should I say? For time would fail to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword. One strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, and tormented." Kind of rough, huh? Verse 38 says, "In whom the world was not worthy, they wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and in holes in the ground." But what does it say in verse 39? "Yet all these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised." Did not receive what was promised. "Since God had provided something better, so they would not, apart from us, be made perfect." Let's carry on to verse 1 of chapter 12. If you have it in your Bible, in many Bibles, it says, the heading of the chapter will say, "The example of Jesus." It says, "Therefore," and when I was growing up in church, I remember pastors constantly saying, you have to look what the therefore is there for, right? It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so clings to us so easily, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus." Looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has taken a seat. That's how I remember learning it. Has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Hebrews 11, verses 32 through 12. Now, again, if we grew up in church, there's probably some names in here we recognize, like Abraham, David, Samuel. But there's also some references to people we really don't know of because they're not named, right? Now, for those who first read this when it was first written, they probably recognized who these unnamed characters were. The widow of Zarephath, something like that, was probably the widow whose son Elijah healed. People think that the reference to the person being cut in two, they think that was Isaiah the prophet. And the revolutionary leaders talked about was most likely the Maccabees. If you remember the term Maccabees, back in Israel's history, the nation of Israel's history, these group of revolutionary leaders called the Maccabees. And if you grew up with a Catholic Bible, they have it's a little thicker Bible. If you've seen a Catholic Bible, it's a little thicker. They have these books in there. Among them are the book of Maccabees, which describe these revolutionary leaders back in the day of Israel. But for all these great leaders of faith, it's what's said in verse 39 that stands out to me. It says, yet all of these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised. Many were stoned to death, killed by the sword, sawed in two, tortured, flogged, mocked, and imprisoned, wandered in deserts and mountains. Not a very highly sought after life, right? Not very pleasant. For all the accomplishments of some, there were just as many who, at least by current standards, were failures. Failures. You know, if we grew up in church, we learned about, like I said, David and Samuel and Solomon. You know, big heroes of the faith. But recorded in our Bible, there are just as many people who we look at today and say they were failures. Countless biblical prophets who tried to tell people to change their ways, yet despite their repeated action, sacrifices, and efforts, they were, judging by modern standards, failures. Unless we think that these were alone, these unnamed characters, minor characters that we've never heard of, were the only failures in the Bible. I mean, we need not look farther than perhaps by modern standards the biggest failure of all, Jesus. At least to those in his time, right? Jesus was a failure. He was expected by many to lead a revolution and establish a new kingdom. On the cross, he was derided as being the king of the Jews because they expected him to be the new king. Yet this so-called king of the Jews was tortured, brutalized, crucified in the most painful, the most humiliating death that the Romans could conceive of. For only the worst of the worst. I mean, even at his death, if you remember, the soldiers there were mocking him, saying, hey, if you really are king of the Jews, save yourself. But you're not. You're a failure. What does the Bible say? Looking unto Jesus, what we just read. Looking unto Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. I mean, what? Right? Did we read that right? The man who was derided as a failure, the one who was crucified as a criminal, is now honored by God. Why? Why? At least according to the author of Hebrews, it's because of his faithfulness. Because of his faithfulness. You know, we've got to stop thinking of success as results, accomplishments, and acquisitions. And instead, start thinking of success, or at least success as in the eyes of God, as faithfulness, perseverance, dedication. faithfulness, perseverance, dedication. This is what God asks of us. Not results, not accomplishments, not status, but faithfulness, perseverance, and dedication. All these figures recounted in Hebrews chapter 11 were considered successful by God, not because of what they accomplished, but because of their faithfulness. This is all God asks of us. To be faithful to the person God asks you to be. To keep going, to keep following the path God has for you, to be who God made you to be. To run the race that is in front of you. To run your race. You know, in distance running, coaches and trainers will often talk about running your race, running your pace. So it's easy when you get amongst, the crowd, especially at the start line, to get really excited, to get energized, and you just take off running these, 8-minute milers or 7-minute milers or 6-minute milers. And just take off with them. And what turns out, because most people, if you don't train at running an 8-minute mile or a 7-minute mile or a 6-minute mile, you're going to find yourself, you can keep up with them for so long, but eventually you're going to tire out, you're going to wear out, and you're going to be dying by the end of the race. So they say, don't worry about what those other people are running. Run your race. It's the same way when we chase after success. Sure, we might achieve money and success and power, status and wealth and stuff. But these things, they come at a cost. Just like running the race, when we take off pursuing those faster times, trying to keep up with the Joneses, we're going to find ourselves worn out and tired and out of gas when we need it. It comes at a cost to try to keep up with the expectations of others. I was talking to a pastor this week of a bigger church out in Broomfield, and he's telling me about he's been at that church for about 10 or 15 years, and he said over those 10 or 15 years he's kept track of every new church that's come up, in the north part of the city. And he's telling me that the success rate, at least as he's counted it, is about 10%, meaning about 10% of the churches he tracked last. Those are pretty sobering numbers, as we are a new church, right? And being real this morning, as a new pastor or as a pastor of a new church, I think about that, and I wonder, did those pastors fail God? Did those churches fail God? I ask myself that same question. Boy, if our church doesn't make it 10 years, am I a failure? If our church doesn't get to 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, am I a failure? So often when pastors get together, it's kind of just like we're showing off each other's trophies, bragging what we've done, and it's easy to kind of look at the person with the biggest church, with the most people, with the most results, and think, wow, they are the successful pastor, they are the successful leader. And it's easy to look at these smaller, struggling churches and think, boy, they're not doing something right. God's not pleased with them. God's not behind what they're doing. And let me be real, I think it's easy even for me as a pastor and as a leader to fall in those same traps, to fall in those same ways of thinking. But the thing is, I don't think that's what God asks of us. I don't think that's what God asks of me. Like in life, I don't think, to be honest, I don't think we're competing against anyone except ourselves, if that makes sense. We're simply to run the race that is set before us to the best of our ability. To be the best friend we can be, the best parent we can be, the best partner, the best spouse, the best coworker we can be. It's like when I was in, I remember when I was in, like I said, running cross country in high school. And I wasn't a great runner, like I said, and it was so easy for me to get out my course, to be running and to struggling, and to see someone way off ahead of me and feel like I got to catch that person to be successful. And then you get past that person and think, I've got to catch that next person to be successful. And I remember one race in particular, I was slow and I was struggling, and I was way behind, probably 50, 100 yards behind this runner. And this coach, on the sideline was cheering me on, says, "Hey, go after that guy. He's your only real competitor." I was like, "Oh." And sure enough, I did not catch him because I was slow and I was tired. But I was running my best. I was doing the best with what I was capable of. I think it's so easy, again, as a runner, when I get to these athletic events, it's so easy to look and be like, I want to compete with this guy next to me and this woman next to me. And I forget about that, this guy is 20-something. He's got no kids. He's got an easy job. He can spend all week running and crushing like 50 miles. And this woman, she's a stay-at-home mom who just like runs for fun. An Instagram poster of workouts. But I'm not competing with this woman who's going to kill my time. I'm not competing with this 20-something dude who's going to crush me. I'm competing with myself, and that's what's great about distance running, because I'm competing with myself to work hard, to post a good time, and just to try hard and finish the race. And if I make a good time, even better. The race that God wants us to run doesn't involve wealth or status or stuff, but it does involve loving others, showing compassion, doing right. It's kind of an anecdotal example, I guess, but we think about those folks, whether they're our own relatives or stories we've heard about, people who, in their last dying moments, who do they want by their side? Right? Who do they want around their hospital bed? Who do they want with them in their home in their last moments of life? They're not like, hey, I bring in my big bass boat, back it up in here. They're not like stacked, by piles of bills next to my bed, right? They're like, where's my kids? Where's my grandkids? Where's my great-grandkids? Where's my son? Where's my grandson? Where's my friends? Where's my family? It's faithfulness. It's faithfulness that God wants, not results. Yes, God calls us to be faithful to what God has given us. But God calls us to be faithful, not pursue stuff, results, numbers. God calls us to be faithful with what God has given us, to be the best parent, the best spouse, the best friend, the best coworker, the best person we can be, the best person God has called you to be. That's what God asks of us, to be faithful. That's all God wants from you. That's all God needs from you. So stay faithful. Keep running. Amen.